All right, everyone. Well, welcome. We are going to get started. Uh, September group and team coaching special interest group. My name is Dominique Mas. I am your host and one of your presenters for today's sake. And we're so happy that you have joined us. So today we'll cover team and group coaching models, frameworks to support your coaching with David Matthew Pryor and yours truly. Unfortunately, Maribel, who was supposed to join us, will not be able to join for personal reasons. So it will be David and myself. Quick difference between teams and groups so that we all agree and know what we're talking about. When we're thinking about teams, we're thinking about a specific type of group in which all members are really working together towards a common goal. So through coaching, the team might consider their ways of working together, their relationships, how to best move forward to achieve the team's agreed upon goals. The coaching usually will focus on or support the team with their processes, their performance, and it contributes to a really healthy culture of collaboration and how thinking about how they fit within the organization, within the larger systems as well. So the team coach considers the team as an entity, while the action the team chooses to focus on might call on individuals' strengths. They are always connected to the team's goals. So example, the marketing team at a startup, including the CMO, the EVP, the VP, and even maybe some marketing interns, right? So really an intact team working together. When we're thinking about groups, we're really thinking about bringing together groups of individuals who are working towards their own goals and share a common context. That could be an interest, a challenge. So participants will benefit from the others' wisdom, stories, and the group coach will ensure that every member receives value from the coaching by creating a safe, brave environment in which all group members are evolving towards their own goals. And the coach will also encourage peer coaching. We'll talk about that in a bit, to allow members to get curious with each other and to work towards their own actions. So an example of a group might be a group of first-time managers in an organization who are working in completely different departments, and they're coming together to work on their leadership. All right, now that we know what we're talking about, I'm going to invite David to the stage. David, is so great to have you here. David Matthew Pryor brings 20 plus years of organizational coaching experience as a master certified coach, ICF credentialed. He's based in the New York City metropolitan area, and his work in coaching executive and senior leadership teams spans internationally across a diversity of industries. David's approach to leadership development is focused on performance with integrity to align the business, organization, teams, and leadership. David holds additional coaching credentials from ICF and EMCC in team coaching and coaching supervision. David, over to you, my friend.
All right, thanks, Dom. Pleasure to be here and meet with you all on the West Coast. So welcome. I would actually like to start with a poem, actually. So what we're going to do, actually, so I'm going to talk a little bit before the poem is about 6 team conditions and the team diagnostic survey. So that'll be kind of the framework of that I'll be actually covering today. But I'd like to start with the poem because in my own experience and working with others in this space, the team coaching space has really pushed my outer edges of what I thought coaching is and what it should be and how I was trained and educated to a wider space that encompasses much more of a systemic view and much more, I would say, variety of the way we actually intervene and work with teams. And it's required me to really get out of my comfort zone from the one-on-one executive coaching that I've done for several years and to do this in more of a team environment. So this is called Just Beyond Yourself. And you can listen to this maybe through the lens of what you think, if you're already doing team coaching or thinking about team coaching, what it actually might take for you to actually work beyond your edges. This is called just beyond yourself. Just beyond yourself. It's where you need to be. Half a step into self-forgetting, and the rest restored by what you'll meet. There is a road always beckoning. When you see the two sides of it closing together at that far horizon and deep in the foundations of your own heart at exactly the same time, that's how you know it's the road you have to follow. That's how you know it's where you have to go. That's how you know you have to go. That's how you know. Just beyond yourself, it's where you need to be. And so this work has, when I got into team coaching probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I was finding that this was the emergent space that I needed to be in. And I knew it was where I needed to go. And I put my faith and trust into just jumping into that space. And in that exposure to multiple different schools of team coaching and thought leadership, I came across the 6 team conditions. But before I get there, I wanted to do a little bit of survey of who's in the room just to get to know you a little bit. So if you want to take your cell phone and scan that in, or if you want to just go to menti.com and put the access code 67917579, I will put that in the chat as well. And then I will go to Mentimeter. So just give me a chat, just give me a second to get to that site to open it up. And it looks like some of you have already jumped into the first poll, which is great. So Dom, you can see this on the screen, right? How would you classify yourself as a primary coach? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so 5 external coaches and looks like 1 internal, or maybe 6 external coaches. Looks like we're all externals. Okay. Great. So let me ask you, are you currently a member of a team? Okay, great. And
I like that you made space for the not sure.
yeah, are we on a team or is this a group? What is this exactly? Exactly. So, super. Um, why would I care about asking you that question? You know, why ask you that question? This is about team coaching. Why would I want to know if you're on a team or not? What does that have to do with your work as a coach, if you're on a team or not? Any thoughts on that? You can just verbally pop.
You're putting yourself in their shoes because you've had that experience, not just as the team leader, but as a team participant.
Yeah. So Heidi, that's great because I realized actually went on a team coaching voyage with Krister Lowe, Ruth Wagaman, Peter Hawkins. This is on the coast of Norway a couple of years ago, and it was a team coaching cruise where we were going to sail the tall ships on the coast of Norway, and we all had to work as a team. And we had a whole bunch of team coaches on board who had all different opinions about how things should be done, but not that many of them were actually members of a team. So they actually had a hard time getting along because they were all coaching leaders of teams and being their own leaders. So it's important. I'm a member of a few teams, and I have to tell you, I've learned so much by actually being a team member. It's humbled me when I work with team leaders because I can really empathize what it is to be a team member and also be a team leader. You know, I lead a few teams. Do you currently lead or manage a team? Just be curious to know. Maybe you also have that experience right now or not. It's not a value judgment. It's more just kind of curiosity if that's currently in your space. So 5 or yes. Okay, so you relate to some of the things that I'm going to talk about being a team leader. In your organizational executive coaching, have you coached or are you currently coaching a team leader in your space? Okay, great. So hence the relevance, a lot of the work that I've actually gotten from team coaching has actually been coaching a team leader first, where I wasn't actually talking to the sponsor or the HR rep, or I wasn't even asked to do team coaching. Though when I started to do the engagement, as the person unpacked their situation, I started to find out a lot about the team dynamics and what's going on. And much of my work has actually evolved from my one-on-one space directly into the organization to work with as a team coach. So I didn't have to sell so much the team coaching as I had to really understand the leader's context. And that's why I wanted to ask for these polls to give you some context. And are you currently coaching a team? So you might be coaching a team leader. I'm just curious right now, are you currently coaching a team? Okay, 2 yes, 5 no. Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. Super. Okay, so let me stop sharing that. And let's see, I want to share with you a resource before I go into some of the slide presentations. This is a blog I wrote that talks about the whole transition of actually becoming a team coach and crossing the bridge from executive coaching to team coaching. I still do executive coaching, team leader coaching, and team coaching, though I had to kind of make that transition of actually what are the things that are going to be required of me if I'm going to do more team coaching, and what can I actually build upon that I already know from executive coaching that actually is transferable to the team coaching space. So you might find that blog of interest to read when you get a chance. And so I'm going to go over and Dom, you'll maybe let me know when I have 5 minutes left. I'm going to try to present this in 20 minutes and give you some 10-minute Q&A. So it'll be a little bit of a laser show, but if you want to think in threes for the 6 team conditions, it's really about what are the conditions that drive the process and behaviors that yield results. So we're actually thinking not behavior first, but actually we're thinking conditions. And so some of the right conditions in the 6 team conditions work based on 20 plus years of research from scholars at Harvard, Yale, and others has been that in order to get the team effective, you need to have some of the essentials that are non-negotiable, a real team that's bounded, stay together long enough to do the work, they're stable, and they're interdependent. They require the work to be done between each other. There's a compelling purpose that's clear. Everybody knows what the outcome is going to look like. It's challenging and motivating, and it's compelling, meaning it really affects the work we do in terms of other stakeholders. I work with a lot of healthcare teams right now, and their work is so consequential to the patients and the healthcare system. Having the right people, which means we want people with the right skills and capabilities, but not just individual competencies, but teamwork skills. And also diversity in the people, meaning there's a diversity of perspectives. So having too much of the same perspective leads to groupthink. Having too different a perspective can actually fracture the team, fragment it. So what's the diversity mix? The enablers are the things that give the team lift. So do we have a structure, meaning do we have norms by the team? Do we have enough people, maybe less than 10, to actually make it a team? Anything beyond that, you're probably talking about more than one team. A lot of times I work with clients and they're like, oh, yes, I want you to work with my team. And they talk about 75 people. And I'm like, well, that's maybe more of a unit than a team. And that might be a collection of teams. And does the work make sense to be done by the team or by individuals? So sometimes teams get divided because it's really more siloed work, and maybe that's required, and maybe less teamwork, and maybe it's a combination. Does the team have a supportive context? Does the organizational support teamwork in terms of the rewards and motivations for team, not just individual? Does the team get information it needs? Does it get consultation when it needs it? Does it have materials and resources? So is the organization supporting actually teamwork, or is it maybe just named that we all want you to be a team, but we're actually not giving you the resources to do that or the structure? Lastly, in the enablers is team coaching. So these were all in order. And team coaching is last because you want all the conditions and the enablers in place so that the team coach can be available and helpful to actually team members. And that team coaching, when you think about team coaching, that could be delivered by an external, an internal coach, an HR leader, could be the team leader delivering coaching, and or it could be the peer coaching happening within the team. So how do we actually think about team coaching in that sense? There are behaviors that once we get those conditions right, that really support equal effort being put into the work, the strategy of the team being innovative in terms of how they work together, and then are we leveraging the knowledge and skills of everybody in the unit? I used to be on a team where I wasn't really being leveraged as a writer. And when I got off that team and on another team, my career flourished. I got promoted to an officer in the bank. And I thought, oh, I'm now being utilized in the best way possible, not to crunch numbers, but actually to communicate narratives. And lastly, the results. So effectiveness in this model is defined as, does the team exceed its output or services in terms of the quality, quantity, and timeliness of who it delivers to and its stakeholders, the team stakeholders? Does the team get better over time as they work together? And am I satisfied in terms of my learning and development being a member of this team? So this is very much a very rigorous structural approach to team coaching. And you can see when you put them all together, they yield to this model, which is the team diagnostic survey, which sometimes I will run this survey with the team and they'll actually they'll evaluate themselves on these conditions, on these processes and behaviors, and on their effectiveness. And this sometimes we use as a baseline metric that we might start with this work with the team, and then we might do a pulse check 6 months later. People or clients appreciate it because of the rigor and the science and the research that's actually gone into the work, to the actual work. So the headline is, get the conditions right to drive the right behavior. And if you do that, it will yield to effective results. A lot of the research that the 6 team conditions folks have done is really around leadership teams. And you can see when they did that 42% of teams were poor in terms of their effectiveness, 37% mediocre, 21% highly effective. So a lot of times some of the traps are we're a team in name only, and we don't have some of these conditions, or the team is too large, or we're clear about our organizational purpose, but really the clarity of the team purpose is low, or we don't have team norms, or we spend more time coaching individuals than the team as a whole. I've seen that a lot with leaders. I've seen that on the teams that I've been on. And until we actually started really coaching the team, we weren't as highly effective as we could have been. So this might be a typical engagement where you might actually do strategic interviews to get some data. You might run a team diagnostic survey for the leadership team. You might observe some of the team meetings, and then you put all of that together. So there are multiple entry points to interventions with teams, though I think a comprehensive one would be a combination of data gathering, doing a diagnostic, seeing the team in action, and then being able to put that all together and communicate that to the leader and then the team. The TDS has a really nice, 16 conditions has a really nice rule that drives excellence, that 60%, a 60-30-10 rule is in the team design, and that's the structuring. 30% is in launching or relaunching a team, 10% is in the coaching. And I have found this to be very true for the work I've done with teams. I spend quite a bit of time actually helping prepare the team leader for the launch and getting the structure right, even in the design. So even if we can morph it or work with it and massage it, we spend a lot of time preparing to get the right trajectory for the team, and then launching successfully, and then coaching that when you show up. So I found this repeatedly in the team coaching work, much more so than I have to do for executive coaching. I prepare for executive coaching, but it's not nearly the lift that I would do when I contract with a team. Much of the work has been in top team development for 6 team conditions. And so their focus has really been around starting to actually focus on the team leader. So there's only so many team coaches in the marketplace, thousands, hundreds of thousands of teams out there that we could never coach all of them, nor might they be able to afford working with an external coach or even an internal coach sometimes. So how can we actually get at the work with enabling team leaders to do this work, and we become somewhat of their mentors or their supervisors to actually do that, to implement the 6 team conditions. So this is an online course that the 6 team conditions folks have developed. I'll put a website in there in a second if you in the chat. But basically, the idea is helping the leader develop these capabilities so they can scale it into the organization. A lot of times leaders just don't know how to run that, and they don't want to be completely dependent on the team coach to be running their meetings and facilitating. They want to be able to do that real time, just in time. And so how can we enable them to do that and put them in the driver's seat where we become much more backstage? They are more front stage. So it's really around artful approach to team performance. So assessing, launching, helping them do pulse checks, and this whole ARCS, if you can, the ARCS, that we assess, we help them reimagine what a team might look like with a really solid structure. We coach them, mentor them, and then we provide them with a clear path to do the pulse checks. So these are all the outcomes of when you do it well. With the 6 team conditions, you hit motivation processes, psychological safety increases, and it says when teams have the clarity and direction that coaching provides, they understand the need for engaging in team practices. So they get the why before the who, and they understand that really clearly and adapting to a changing world and exceeding expectations. Some of the work I do also, and I'll be coming to a close in a couple of minutes, Dom, to give time for some Q&A, is I've done a lot of work in the last 3 or 4 years with, this is where group coaching comes in a sense, where working with groups to do peer consultation for supervision. So I will work with team coaches to actually enhance their skill set and confidence and well-being through the normative ways of looking at our work. So what are the ethics, the contracting, the confidentiality, all the things that emerge in team coaching? What are the formative aspects of you as a team coach, internal or external or team leader? Meaning, what do you need to develop and grow? What's your edge? Where do you need to go just beyond yourself? And then the restorative place of supervision, group supervision, is really that people will bring things that they're stuck in and they need to actually get a reboot or a reframe. And so we use collective, collaborative intelligence in that group supervision for collective wisdom. We all gain when we actually hear real case studies. So I'm currently doing that with the University of Texas, Dallas, where we're doing a program in team coaching practitioner program where people come with real case stuff. They get certified in the TDS, but we primarily use the live sessions for group supervision based on team client cases. Lastly, I think excellent book if you want to pick up senior leadership teams. I'll send a copy of these slides to Dom after the presentation so that you have these as well. And then there's, I'll skip the appendix. There's 2 other resources that I want to share with you related to the team coaching space. One is for more information on the 6 team conditions with great resources, blogs, etc. Would be the 6 team conditions website. And the other resource I'd like to share with you is an article that I co-wrote for Coaching at Work. Let's see, that team coaching ethics, because I think that's also a missing piece right now in the professional association world, that there are individual coaching ethics, but really not too many team coaching ethics or ones that I have seen. Sorry, I actually sent that to Dom, so I need to put that in the big chat.
Looks great, everybody.
Yeah. And then the other 6 team conditions, I'll reiterate. I was communicating with Dom before, and so that's why you're not seeing these. And then I'll make sure that you have this. Yeah, I think you have Crossing the Bridge. You have that went to everybody. So those are a couple of resources for you. And again, that 6-team condition site has a lot of really rich data in there for you to actually draw from in terms of evidence-based practice. And so I think I'm going to just pause now. And I think that was a lot of information in a short period of time, but I wanted to keep the time and be just in time for Dom's presentation in 10 minutes. So I'm opening the floor to any reflections that you might have, questions, observations, anything you'd like to share, feel free.
David, I have a question for you. And if anyone has a question, jump in
sure.
before me. But I'm curious, you mentioned at the beginning that when you discovered team coaching, you knew that this was the space for you. And I'm curious how you knew that. What attracted you to it?
Well, this happened like maybe pre-COVID. And for myself personally, I was reaching a max point. I think I'd done enough executive coaching that I was becoming, like I'm saying, well, what's the next frontier? What's my edge? I can do this pretty well. And there's always something to learn for sure. And I was teaching coaching. I was teaching coaches at Columbia University, still doing that, et cetera. Though I was sensing in some of my own training that when I got involved in coaching in the mid 90s, I jumped into coaching because I sensed, wow, there's something here. I'm going to volunteer at ICF. I got on the board, did all this stuff, did a lot of stuff where I was donating my time because my heart and soul was like, there's something here for me. And I felt the same way, 4 or 5 years ago when I felt that there's maybe even a glut of coach training organizations and a glut of coaches out there teaching one-on-one coaching, but not the team space. And I felt the problems of the world are not going to be solved by the single leader. They're going to be solved by people working together. So I became very interested in it. And I felt, at least, I'm not a surfer, but I felt like the next wave is going to be team coaching. And I almost like in a gut sense intuited that, Dom. So I thought, jump in, do it now, et cetera. And I'm an introvert. I don't usually, I'm usually go to my room at the end of the day and have room service. And so this is really beyond myself. And I thought, this is my stretch. This is where I think it's headed. And this is where I can really blend and not throw out everything I learned in one-on-one coaching, but really use it in a much wider pool, in a much greater kind of systemic context. So that's how I kind of landed there.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think it's great that you're looking at ethics from a team perspective because, to Don's point and your point that really, I don't know, has been done. Do you mind? I'll take a look at the article, but do you mind just speaking to it at like a high level as far as like what you noticed?
Yeah. So what we noticed, and I actually co-wrote the article with a colleague of mine and Sam Humphrey, and because I had seen her actually present a session on ethics at the New York ICF chapter a couple of years ago, and I was intrigued by how she was provocative. And I teach ethics in the Columbia coaching program as well. And so I thought, I really have liked that space, and it also aligns with performance with integrity. So we co-wrote this article. And what we shared with each other in writing it thematically is that we found that there were so many challenges in the team coaching space that, at least from the executive coaching to the team coaching space, got magnified in terms of contracting, knowing who the client is. So it's not just this person across the table from us, but it's also a multiplicity of clients, of stakeholders that might be clients, sponsors who might be clients, team leader might be a client, the team itself might be client. So the complexities involved in serving who the client is and co-creating with the client became much more complex and much more nuanced, as well as the team coaches out there maybe having a clear philosophy and definition and approach to practice, and how they actually do their work. So contracting, process, stakeholders in terms of who we're really serving, the training and ability to actually work with a team, because sometimes the one-on-one coaching, the skill sets are very different and required. And then helping sponsors and people who hire team coaches be able to have a filter to say, what should I be actually asking of that team coach in terms of those kinds of things? And the other traps that might happen with teams where sometimes with the client's agenda, I've worked with teams where the sponsor has an agenda that's different than the team leader, and the team leader has an agenda that's different than the team. And the team members don't always have the same agenda as the leader. So I thought, oh, there's a great opportunity for us to have ethical alignment without imposing, but actually try to co-create that. So those are some of the high level kind of conceptual things that you'll probably see covered in that article. So shall we turn it over to Dom, unless there are any other questions or reflections? I want to give her her due time. Yeah.
We have plenty of time, so I want to make sure there aren't any other questions.
Yeah, so I'd just be curious, what are I don't know, what's bubbling up for you? Doesn't even have to be a question. Many of you are external coaches. I'm just wondering seeing this approach. The other thing I'll add is we combine structural coaching with emergent process coaching. So we're giving you a very solid structure, and then when you have that structure in place, what emerges might be spontaneous, where you bring in other methodologies, et cetera. So it's not only that. Many times I will maybe use the 6 team conditions when I diagnose or listen to a team leader talk about their team. I'm thinking that structurally. And then sometimes what I'll introduce might be one of the conditions, like we might work with purpose, not all of them. And then I might bring in some other methodologies that I've learned. So it's the combination of art and science. I use the 6 team conditions for my science base, and I use all the other things that I've exposed to, including some of the tools from 6 team conditions, as my art form. So therefore, I'm often delivering something that is a blend with a really, I'd say the root of the tree. The terrain that I'm giving water to is the 6 team conditions. What I'm branching out to might be different kind of maybe methods, or doing a team EI survey, or doing something more interpersonal in terms of, or an assessment, or thinking styles, et cetera. So it's not one thing, but this is one that I found has served me well. And also clients, when I bring in this work, if it's a tough client, they appreciate the rigor and the research that's actually gone into the work. And so that sometimes will help give me credibility for building on the shoulders of the people who've done the heavy duty research.
Super helpful. Thank you so much, David. I have some more questions for you. I'll take them offline. But I'm so grateful for you joining us today, and we'll have a final debrief at the end. So if any other questions come up for you, please make a note of them, and we'll go into them. All right, we'll move into groups, and a little bit more then about me before we start going. I co-founded Group Coaching HQ, mentioned earlier, ICF accredited program, and we're really focusing on supporting coaches to build impactful group coaching program. Through a previous role that I had as head of coaching and curriculum at a startup company that was solely focused, and that still is solely focused on group coaching, I've built group coaching programs for Fortune 500 companies. I've trained hundreds of coaches in the art of group coaching. And I'm also a consultant for organizations that are scaling their coaching culture within their walls. And so I support them to really get, and David, I love that you mentioned that too, really get their leaders thinking as coaches as well. It's not about just us as external coaches going in and coaching, but also internally supporting them to maximize their own internal resources. My background is in educational leadership and change, and I bring a lot of that work, especially the work through inquiry into coaching and specifically group coaching and training as well. I'm a surfer, I'm an adventurer, and I live a very peaceful life in Brooklyn, New York, with my beautiful 13-year-old dog, Professor, and my partner. So that's a little bit more about me. And with that, we'll dive into group coaching. And what I'd love to do first, and David started with a poem, I'm going to start with a quote. So I'm just going to share my screen here. And this is Martin Luther King, and he said, and I encourage you to close your eyes if that's accessible to you in this moment. We are tied together in the single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. And whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. And I love this quote when thinking about group coaching, because to me, group coaching means that as coaches, we're taking a step back and we're allowing everybody in the room to become a coach to each other, to ask curious questions, and to help them, to help each other be who they ought to be. So, David, and again, I love how many similarities I'm seeing today. You talked about conditions for team coaching to go well. And I think that's, I didn't call them conditions, but I think that's exactly what they are. If we want a group coaching cohort to be really cohesive, there are steps that we can take when we're creating our groups that are going to be really helpful. So first thing I'd love to do is spend a little bit of time going through these steps, and then I'll share what we have come up as the model that we use for creating cohesive group coaching cohorts and what makes a group coaching cohort cohesive. So as we're thinking about the first step, we're really thinking about the who and the why. And what that means is that we need to identify who our participants are. We want to make sure that they are individuals who have a shared context. This might be a challenge that they're facing. It might be a stage of their life, right? Perhaps it's people going through a midlife transition. Perhaps it's a bunch of directors in an organization. So they have that shared context. It might be a challenge. It might be a situation that they're in. And we want to make sure that we're creating goals for the program that are directly related to this group's needs. So in order to create a program that's going to be impactful, we need to know exactly who is in it. We need to know why they're in the program. And we need to know why we're in the program. Like, why am I building this program? Am I doing it because I don't have enough bandwidth anymore to coach one-on-one people, and I need to bring more people together to be more effective? Am I doing it because I want to create more connection between my one-on-one clients so that they feel less alone? So I want to be thinking about this in the back of my mind. The second step that we want to really think about is, whenever possible, sometimes we're contractors for organizations. We don't have an opportunity to curate the group intentionally. But if you're an external coach looking to create programs, group coaching programs internally in an organization, and you might have a bunch of participants, maybe you have a group of 30 people and you have to place them in groups. Perhaps you're building your own group coaching program through your own practice because you are coaching many leaders and you want to bring them together. Whatever it is, I encourage you to think about a couple of things. One is bring together participants who really will be committed to showing up and contributing. How might you know that? You might actually make that a requirement for participation. You might, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec, but you might get them to think about their engagement in the program before it even begins. but really you want people who will be committed to showing up and to contributing, because otherwise you're not going to be supportive of or rather the whole group is not going to be supportive of each other. If one person keeps disappearing, it's not going to help you create a cohesive program. And then the second thing is things that you want to avoid. In group coaching, you probably want to avoid putting together people who are working directly on the same team. So if you're working internally to an organization, or if you're building groups within an organization, people who work directly on the same team will have pre-existing relationships. It might change the dynamic. Sometimes you don't have a choice, and that's okay. But again, in an ideal world, if you can avoid that, that's great. The other thing that I encourage you to avoid whenever possible is creating a group where one person is going to stand out as an only. So that would be the only man in a group of women. I had one group in an organization. It was a bunch of emerging leaders. So roughly in terms of age group, I'd say late 20s to early 30s. And in that group, there was only one person who was a parent. And that was really hard for her, because others would not relate to some of the issues that she was sharing in terms of her own balance, time, how to think about her career versus motherhood. So thinking about, okay, who is in this group and are there any onlys? Perhaps it's just one person of color. That person does not want to have to explain everything to everybody. So we want to really be, if possible, intentional about who is in the group. Our next piece is to structure for success. And David, you also talked about structure. So I again, so many similarities. We really want to be thinking about the best structure for the group coaching program. And I often have people ask me, well, what is the best structure for a group coaching program? Is it 10 weeks? Is it 12 weeks? Is it 6 people? Is it 10 people? And my answer is always the same. I don't know, because I don't know your context. So when we're thinking about structure, you really want to consider what will be the best way to serve the people who are in this group. For example, if you're thinking about engagement length, realistically, how long might it take for group members to achieve their goals? If you're working with job seekers, you don't want to create a program that's 6 months to a year long, right? They don't want to be in there for that long. They probably want to get a job in 3 months. If you're working with leaders at a higher level of the organization, let's say you have a group of CEOs, they probably don't have time to meet every week. So they probably want to meet on a monthly basis, and they want to meet for a longer period of time, because that's a better way for them to be in support of each other. So think about really how long will it take for everyone to achieve their goals. If we're thinking about session length, think about bandwidth for people. Think about how many people are in the room. Generally, I will say, I personally like groups that meet twice a month. Once a month sometimes can end up being a long time between sessions, and people might disconnect. I find that when people are meeting twice a month, they tend to be a little bit more connected. Of course, your group size will impact frequency of meeting. It will also impact the length of your session. So if you think about length, you want to think, how many people can I have, so that, again, realistically, everybody will have a chance to speak, and that everybody will create a meaningful experience for themselves. How many people do I have, or how much time do I have for diverse voices and perspectives to be represented in the group? And that will also affect your session structure, because you might think, okay, I'm given a group of 12 people and I'm given 60 minutes. That's not a lot of time, right? That's 5 minutes per person speaking. If you think about it, that's not a lot of time. So what I might do here is think about my sessions and organize more breakouts so that I make sure they still have time to be together in smaller groups and connect with each other. So I don't want to give you a specific number. I personally usually think about it in this way. If I'm creating programs within organizations, I'll think if I have up to 6 participants, 60 minutes is okay. If I have 9 participants, then I'll do 90 minutes. That's my rule of thumb. If I can do it this way, that's what I like to do. It allows me to ensure that there's enough time for everybody. But again, sometimes that's not possible. We're talking ideal world here. Next step to think about. Educate your group members. If you think about groups, we are part of so many groups in life, right? Generally, we're part of our team at work, which is a type of group. We're part of a family group. Sometimes we might take part in a class, in a writing group. And for all of these groups, we kind of know how to show up. There's a learned behavior from society, from our parents, from school. We kind of know how to show up. But a group coaching situation, very, very few people have been in a group coaching setting. They have no idea how to show up. So my encouragement to everyone is, if you are working in, whether it's an organization or if you are building your own group coaching programs, think about how you might educate your participants before they walk into the actual group. In a one-on-one first chemistry meeting or first session, or before you start, you will always think about what coaching is and isn't, right? You might educate the other person to help them understand what the difference is between coaching and therapy. Same thing in group coaching. We want people to understand what group coaching is, what it isn't. We want them to know that, hey, in group coaching, we don't show up with advice for each other. You might make space at the end of the session, let's say for 15 minutes, for people to share resources or share advice, but we're coaching. So instead, we show up with curious questions. We show up listening deeply to each other. So we want to even equip our group members to do that. And I really like, I literally just launched a program within an organization. I have 6 groups with them, and I asked them in their, they had a 1-day orientation for their full leadership development program. And I asked them if I could have a little bit of time to do an orientation. And so everybody who was going to be in a group was present on that orientation. I talked about coaching. I talked about what it is, what it isn't, how it works. I talked about what makes a great coaching question. I encouraged them to think about the difference between giving advice and asking a question. We did a listening exercise. So I actually taught them, and this was not me coaching, this was me teaching what it looks like to be in a group coaching setting. And then the final thing that we want to think about is help them understand how psychological safety is co-created in a group. So you might, again, give them tools, give them ideas of, if they hear someone, perhaps they hear a microaggression, you want to help them understand how to react to that. If they're the victim of it, you want to help them understand how to react if they notice it and want to say something. So give people tools to be in that group session so that they understand how to show up. And then the last step is get to know your people. You really want to know who is in your group. For many of my groups, not all of them, example, this organization, I'm doing 6 groups. I am not doing this, but if possible, meet people one-on-one, 15 minutes. Ask them a couple of questions. What's your previous experience with groups? What did you love about being in a group? What did you not love? So you're starting to get to understand how they might show up, and you might start to ask some coaching questions there to help them think about how they want to show up in this group. Another way, if you're not able to actually meet people one-on-one, totally fine, it happens. I do two things. If I'm actually putting the program together myself and I'm bringing in individuals, I have an application form to understand what they want to do out of it. And once they're in the program, once they've been accepted into the program, I have an onboarding form. And if I'm coaching in an organization, I always have that onboarding form. And I'll ask things like, what would you like to walk away with after this program? What are you looking forward to about being in a small group setting? What are your concerns about being in a small group setting? So again, I'm not meeting them one-on-one, but I'm starting to understand who is showing up and perhaps what they're bringing. You know, we all have luggage. What are they bringing into my sessions that I need to know about? All right, I'm going to pause here for these 5 steps. And I'm going to move into what we have seen as the elements of a cohesive coaching cohort. And it always starts and ends with trust. That is the number one piece that we know is going to create cohesion. Are people comfortable? Do they feel that they can be open in this group? Do they feel that they will not be judged? And I want to differentiate between trust and psychological safety here. When I'm thinking about trust, I am thinking about the relationship between 2 people usually. So member to member, member to coach, coach to member. Psychological safety, we co-create as a whole group. So then we're really thinking about the whole bunch of people that are together. And it begins with the trust that people have in each other. So one way that I love to do this from the very beginning is session 1. I will put people into small breakouts and I'll do even just 3 or 4 minutes, but I'll try to do several breakouts where everybody gets to meet everybody, either in a pair or in a group of 3. So they immediately have that sense of connection between people or between participants from the very beginning. What happens next? We're building trust, we're building psychological safety. Now we want to build insight. This is where, just like in one-on-one sessions, we want people to be learning. We want people to be growing with each other. One thing that I might do is I might pause the group at some point and say, hey, what are we all learning about ourselves? Take a moment, take 1 minute, everybody write down an insight. So just like we do in coaching one-on-one, we need to facilitate these moments for our group coaching people. Remember that here to work towards their own individual goals. So it might be a question that I ask, hey, what are you learning about yourself? Think back to the intention that you set at the beginning of this session. What is coming up for you? And here we're deepening their awareness, their self-connection. The next piece that makes a cohort cohesive is inspiration. Members tend to inspire each other through their stories, through their support, through active questioning of each other. So we want to make sure, again, that we're creating opportunities for all group members to inspire and be inspired. I'm flying through these. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to fly through, but you will have this slide as well, so fear not. The next piece is support. We want support. We want members to be able to recognize and remember each other's strengths. They mirror each other, they cheer each other on. What I love to do in order to create that sense of support is that sometimes I'll ask people to notice at the end of the session, for example, I'll say, let's take 8 minutes. And I go around my screen. So I'm going to do it right now. So I would say, David, you're going to speak to Diana. Diana, you're going to speak to Audrey. Audrey, you're going to speak to Galen. And I hope I pronounced her name right. And then what I'll do is I will say, David, what did you notice about Diana today? What's a strength that you want to highlight that you heard from her? And I'll say, Diana.
Ethics.
Aha, there we go. Thank you. And I'll go around the room in this way. Diana, what did you notice about Audrey? And that creates that sense of support. They now have to listen to each other. They now have to notice what it is that they're coming in with. Next is challenge. And if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to look into the work of Timothy Clark and the stages of psychological safety that he talks about. And the highest stage that he talks about is challenger safety. That's the place where members feel confident that they can safely challenge each other. That helps to expand their perspective. That helps to take risk. And now they're learning to do that in a controlled setting, right? They're asking edgy questions. That's something that's a skill that they are then developing that they can take outside of the group. So I love that space where a group becomes able to challenge each other, because that means I can really I can lean back and they're doing the work for me. I don't need to do all the challenging. That's amazing. All right, the next piece that we've seen important is curiosity. And as coaches, we all know what that means, right? We want to help them, and we can help guide that conversation so that they're really excavating topics. They're investigating possibilities with each other. They're really diving into what it means to understand each other and to understand themselves. And the final piece is movement, because once again, we want to make sure that there is a sense of growth, right? In the same way as in our one-on-one coaching session, we end a session with action, commitment. Same thing. We want to know, how are you going to apply what you've learned today? You've probably got a lot of insight from hearing each other's stories. What are you going to do about it? So we want to make sure that there's movement towards their goals, and that's facilitated by all the things that we've talked about before. And what made this model a circle, because it's so important that there's a little bit of everything, and there's a little bit of movement actually through all of these elements. All right, I'm going to pause here because I can talk about this forever, but I also want to make sure that I'm hearing from you, and would love to have some. Let me pause here. If any questions, I'm happy to take them now. And I see a question.
You have a question in the chat, Dom. It says from Tracy, could you please share more about the type of the 6 groups you're running in the organization? What are the groups centered around? Are they organized by topic?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. So this organization they're based upstate New York, and they are all architects and engineers, and they have a leadership development program that they run every year. They have a certain number of people in the cohort that last for the year, and they have 5 modules of 2 days in-person leadership training. That's actual training. After each of the modules, they are divided into smaller groups, and they have a coaching session. So the coaching sessions are usually a couple of weeks after they've had the 2-day training. And we dive into, what did you learn about yourself in the 2-day training? And what have you noticed in the past couple of weeks come up as you've been thinking about implementing what you've learned in that program? And so, yes, there are topics that are basically the topics that they're covering in their training sessions, but there's a lot of openness there, because they're all bringing in something different, and they might be reacting to a different piece of the training. So what my role is in that case is, okay, in that training, you talked about values, you talked about how to communicate clearly, and everybody's coming in with, well, I want to think about values, I want to think about communication. So my role at the start of that session is to really hear everybody out, and then I'll ask a question to make them think, and I'll say, what are you all noticing about what everybody is sharing? What are some common themes that we're hearing? And now we're starting to get the group to actually coalesce around a theme. And so they might say, well, in the topic of values, I heard that it's really hard to apply them sometimes because there are conflicts. I heard in the topic of communication that we might be sending out conflicting information, or that I'm conflicted about sharing something that's coming up from leadership. So now we have internal conflict in two different settings. Maybe internal conflict is what we want to explore together as a group. So I hope this helps to visualize like how I bring together the conversation when everybody's bringing something different to the session. Tracy, go ahead. You're muted. Yeah.
For a second. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. I think this question might be for both of you. It's kind of like a follow-up question. That's why I rose my hand right away. I'm just wondering, like, sometimes I'll have requests from like an intact team, and I'm not clear. Well, it's not that I'm not clear, but I have some discretion, I guess, as to whether I would provide a group coaching format to them or a team coaching format. So I'm just curious to know how if you've been in that situation and how you determine what would be most suited. They're usually very small teams, like a group of executives or a group of managers.
David, I'd love to hear your take on it. I'm happy to go first. My feeling is that if it's a team, it's a team, because they have relationships that exist. They have different dynamics that already exist that I need to be aware of, that I need to understand. And usually, if it's a team, they're working on something together. They're together as a team for a purpose. That teams are created by that purpose, right? So they're together for a reason. So I usually would approach that from a team coaching perspective versus a group coaching perspective, unless it's very clear that, hey, we want everybody on this team to be thinking about internal conflicts. I'm just keeping with that theme, right? And then I'll ask them at the beginning, and I'll make it very clear, we're going to think about this in terms of you as an individual, not as part of this team. But I want the group, whether it's a team or a group, to have clarity around how I want them to show up in that moment. David, would love to hear your take on it.
Sure. So Tracy, when you said intact team or intact group, what can you say more about that?
Sure. So an example is I have an opportunity right now to work with 3 managers and their supervisor. And they just talked about wanting to have some ways of working together to sort of maybe have more psychological safety or learn about conflict management. So it felt more like themes, as opposed to more in-depth team coaching. And I haven't been trained as a team coach either. So I recognize that, like, I used to be a therapist, so I've done a lot of group facilitation and things like this. And I've been coaching for quite a long time, but I also don't want to put myself in a position to be providing team coaching when I haven't been properly trained, because I don't think it's as easy as knowing how to facilitate a group. So, and not that facilitating a group is easy, but you know what I mean? I just feel there's a different other lens for me to keep in mind. So I guess my comfort zone might be to treat it more as like group coaching, where maybe there's a small educational component, kind of like what you're talking about, Dom. Like, maybe I'm providing some of that leadership development, and then we're debriefing it and finding out how people are applying it, as opposed to me working with such a small group of people on their team dynamics, even though that's also important.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if I'm understanding, there's a supervisor and 3 people that report to that person. So they are in like a small little leadership team or management team. So I think as I'm listening to you, I think what you might consider is rather than calling it team coaching, maybe you call it team facilitation for some kind of end purpose. So you might work with them once or twice, where you actually help them get organized or formulate a real specific purpose of that intervention that you do with them. So it could be just a one-timer or a few hours, or it could be on a topic, thematically driven, where you're actually providing some usefulness for the team to actually have some dialogue with itself. But you're not doing a kind of formalized team coaching intervention. And a lot of times sometimes I will start that way with a team where I haven't been actually contracted to a whole engagement, or, it might be they're trying me out, or we might facilitate something, or sometimes it's an offsite or a half day intervention where we do something thematically, which is very useful to them, and then they're off and running. So I haven't really coached the team in a formal 6-month engagement. It's been more of a one-off, and then that can evolve into team coaching. And I would encourage you to definitely look at the 6-team condition site for some of the parameters, because I think that could be useful for you in terms of just educationally. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy, for the question.
You'll also notice the ICF, in their team coaching competencies, they have a couple of preface pages before they introduce what they've written about team coaching competencies. And they've got 4 or 5 columns in there on team mentoring, team facilitation, team building, et cetera. So the lanes are there are multiplied lanes. There's many lanes of intervention, and sometimes your entry point might be more of a light touch before you do something more formal or structured.
Thank you, David. I'm curious from the group actually who is here. We had planned on having a little breakout session following the presentations. Are there more questions that would be beneficial for the whole group and we'd rather stay together? Or do we want to go into little breakouts for 7 to 8 minutes? I'd love to hear, like, maybe in the chat you can put a, breakout or stay. And Tracy will have your question in just a minute, but please, if you have a strong opinion, put it in the chat. We'd love to make sure that we're catering to everyone. I also want to share a resource here, which is a little ebook that we've put together. It's not little. I don't know why I keep saying little. It's an ebook that we've put together and has a ton of information on creating impactful group coaching programs. So feel free to jump in. Thank you, Heidi. And okay, so we're going to stay. 2 people have spoken. They were the fastest. Tracy, go ahead. What's your question?
If anybody else wants to ask a question first, I don't mind waiting to see if to hear someone else's voice.
And we have time, so yeah.
I'm just curious about pricing. So I imagine that team coaching and group coaching is at a different price point than individual. I just was at the ICF LA meeting earlier this week about executive coaching pricing. And I know it's not always a topic that people want to be so vulnerable about or direct about, but even if there could be a range or something that could be a guide as to how we could go about pricing a group coaching or team coaching container or process.
Yeah. David, do you want to speak to the team coaching piece? And I'm happy to jump in for group coaching.
I actually be curious from your colleagues to actually put in the chat, what are their thoughts about pricing, just pricing thoughts in general before you and I answer that. I'd be just, curious from the group that's here, because this is a group and team coaching SIG, special interest group. So what are your thoughts around Tracy's question there?
Tracy, I think we should probably add that to the survey next year for the executive coaching, because it would be a cool combination, because the executive coaching SIG has had a separate focus on group and team once, and we did kind of a collaboration thing. So I think that's actually probably a great collaboration for next year. I'll just speak for myself personally. It depends on what they're buying from a group or team coaching perspective, and then also like what other services. So, are there assessments in there? Are we facilitating on-site, things like that? So I think there's probably a lot of diversity from a pricing perspective. whether you're, you know, like what Dom's saying, like whether you're providing the leadership development or whether someone else is, kind of thing. So I don't mean to be vague. I think that's a really great question, and probably something we can put on the docket for next year.
Yeah, and most of the data out there, like from the conference board, the Sherpa study, there's a whole bunch of surveys that have been done around executive coaching and some of the range of rates from kind of lower tier to kind of, you know, leadership or C-suite tier. So there's a range there. There has not been, to my knowledge, a lot of research done around team coaching pricing. So it's like, as they call used to call it the wild, wild west of coaching. It's probably the wild, wild west if we look at that metaphor of team coaching. But I would say, just like Diana said, I think it's really package driven and price dependent in terms of the intervention type, whether we're talking about you doing a 2-hour session, or whether we're talking about a 6-month engagement, or whether we're talking about 3 months or a half day or an offsite tagged with some leadership coaching. So you have to price that based upon your own price point. And I would remind you that the pricing is not always just when someone asks you for your day, what do you charge for your day fee? I just move away from that because they just have no idea what goes into that day. It's not just me showing up to deliver. So I think if you smartly package a price point that you feel comfortable and credible with based upon your qualifications and experience, and you feel good about, you know, that's good, then I would say go with that. And then as you learn more about the space, you'll probably find that people charge different ranges. And whether that's like Dom's, like she might be part of a leadership development program. They might have a certain budget for coaching. So there's a lot of contextual parameters to kind of consider in pricing. And I don't think there's anyone I couldn't really offer you as, you know, as Diana said, just like a flat fee, but definitely something that you should feel good about and that values your time and contribution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy. Oh, Roland, you can jump in and then I'll share.
All right. So I am relatively new to coaching, but I've been an executive director in nonprofits and so forth. And so I've been asked actually to coach some team members individually. And these are like middle management or upper management. And I'm realizing that, you know, there's such a limit to that because it's almost like here's a person, fix them. And as a matter of fact, one of them, you know, was on their way out, so to speak. And, you know, so I am reevaluating and trying to figure out, you know, how, and it could be a mixture of executive coaching plus, you know, some consulting and leadership development and so forth, because I'm trying to like figure out like to do like more of a supportive ecology that is not just that one individual, but also some of the people they supervise and definitely the person above them. And even if I'm not coaching every single one of them, make sure that they are informed and that they somehow contribute to that. So I was wondering, so it's not group coaching, but, you know, it involves a team or a group. So I wonder if you have any ideas as to how to approach that.
And Roland, just to clarify, do you mean in terms of pricing or
No.
in terms of structure?
In terms of structure, the structure and the approach. These are nonprofits, by the way. Yeah.
I'm going to pause your question just for a second. I want to quickly address Tracy's question to the pricing of group coaching. I have a couple of thoughts that I want to share, and then we'll come back to you. Yeah. Tracy, one of the things that I use personally as a gauge is how much people get paid as contractors when they do group coaching for organizations. And I have a lot of people who have been very honest and told me how much they get paid. So I have a good sense of that. And I won't name any organizations, but basically it ranges per session or per hour rather of actual coaching between $500 and $800, right? Depending on where. So that gives me a base for, okay, well, how much does the organization who is contracting this person actually get paid? Probably double that, probably a lot more. And so that gives me a sense of, okay, so for me per session, I need to think about this. And then because I'm organizing these groups, and for example, these 6 groups, I have a lot of admin going on and I have to pay someone to do that admin. So I always add an admin fee. And so when I do a proposal, I'll have this how much it costs, for coaching. I have an admin fee of, I'm going to actually give you a number, but that last organization, I said it's going to be $7,000. And that includes me sending out surveys. That includes us, like my team, sending out invitations for the coaching, etc. So, but I have the admin fee in addition to the coaching piece. And the last thing I'd say is, what else do you need to think about in terms of, like, are you prepping materials? Are you going to share things that you want your group to read in between your sessions if you're solely focused on group coaching? Is there anything else that will take some of your time that you need to think about? So I'm hoping that gives you a little bit of a, it's not super precise, but at least it gives you an idea of where to go. All right, Roland, and then Diana, I know you have a question as well, and we have literally 3 minutes, so it's going to be a quick one. David, anything you'd like to, I think this Roland's question is more to your realm.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think as you talked about maybe the ecology, working from an ecology perspective and a systemic perspective, how do you serve the system in that intervention? And if you can, I think you have to kind of delineate, if you're going to coach individuals within a group, how do you do that effectively so that there's equity in terms of what you deliver and that one person's not being privileged over another? And also, how do you safeguard the confidentiality of individuals who might talk about other individuals? So there are some ethical considerations, I think, that you probably need to navigate and have as a strong compass for how you actually work. But it sounds like you also, with you having been an executive director, I think you have a particular opportunity to frame it in the nonprofit space in terms of a nonprofit approach to group and team coaching. And that might actually have some very specific parameters. I know one team that I work with I'm working with a healthcare team that's not really a team, it's a group, but they assemble them and they're creating mission-driven teams. So they're all sharing the same mission, even though they're not an intact team, and they're working together. So I think I would encourage you to use some of your own creativity to formulate an approach that you think is ethically sound, and yet can still contribute to the mission of the organization. And again, I'm giving you more of an imaginative response rather than a prescriptive response.
Good. No, that's very helpful. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And so just one thing from a team perspective, so this is likely for David, I gravitate more towards coaching groups, and I like the kind of evenness of the power dynamic. I usually have it like by peers as much as possible. But I had one team that I think I had 5 levels of leadership in the leadership team. It was essentially like supervisor from SVP. And it was very challenging because, some were holding back so the other ones would go, and some weren't saying anything because there was so much power in the room. But I'm curious, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so we can have a separate conversation about this, but any kind of off the cuff, like, oh, I always do this, or recommendations of resources or anything like that when you're dealing with a team that has so many layers in it?
I try to do some things ahead of time with that, like when there are power dynamics and there are people who are on the team who will report to other people, like really, should they be on the same team, and on the same leadership team? And then I will often talk with a leader saying, how do you want me to work with somebody who's their boss and they're also a direct report on the team? And then I talk with a leader, and then I talk with the team about it to say, how are we all going to work together? And then when I facilitate, I try to bring parity in terms of contribution and voices in the room. So I actually might intentionally say, Diana, what are your thoughts here? Or is there anyone who has a very thought that doesn't actually match any of these. So the facilitation of it has to be skillful so that you actually get what you need at the end of the day. And then pairing people up, there's lots of ways. I think I'm leaning back in onto the find creative ways to do that. And also find out when that's actually not going to serve you. If there is too much authority, power and authority dynamic within the vertical, that may actually be counterproductive to what you actually want to achieve with the purpose of that particular entity, group, team.
Thank you. That makes me feel better. I did a lot of those things coming up, and they weren't worried about it, but it happened anyway. But I do like also some of your kind of facilitation and things to try. So thank you.
Sure.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. We are coming to the end of this session. So, David, first of all, I want to give you a big thank you for your generosity and your answers and sharing your time today. Thanks to all of you for such a great turnout today. We appreciate your participation, great questions. And as we always say, it's a good day when we can connect. And today was a great day because we learned and grew together. Thank you for your support today. Thank you, everybody. This concludes today's group and team coaching SIG. Our next one will be on November 19th. It's a panel. It's going to be great. I highly recommend it. Come and ask your questions. Come and enjoy being in community with everyone. But for now, I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll follow up with some slides. Thanks so much, everybody.